The official weigh-ins are supposed to be a formality, a quick step before the violence, but sometimes the scale is the most dangerous opponent a fighter will ever face. This is the reality of weight cutting. It's not about fitness, it's about draining every last drop of water from your body to hit a number. For these athletes, the fight doesn't start in the octagon, it starts days before in a steaming hot bathtub surrounded by exhaustion and danger. This is the hidden cost of a size advantage. This is a practice that has hospitalized champions and claimed lives.
Sa sports, lumabas sa autopsy report na heart attack ang ikinamatay ng isang Chinese mixed martial arts fighter bago ang One Championship noong December 11.
Welcome to the terrifying true stories behind the scariest weight cuts in UFC history. Renan Barao, the champion who fell. At one point, Renan Barao was untouchable. He was the UFC bantamweight champion, a pound-for-pound great riding a 32-fight unbeaten streak. He was a king. Then came UFC 177. While cutting the final pounds to make 135 pounds for his title defense against TJ Dillashaw, his body gave up. Barao fainted. He hit his head on a bathtub. The champion was rushed to the hospital. His fight was cancelled. That incident was a brutal turning point. The man who seemed invincible was suddenly vulnerable. He continued to struggle massively to make weight, looking drained and slow. The extreme cuts had stolen the explosive power that made him a champion. His move to featherweight came too late. The damage was done. Years of brutal dehydration had derailed a legendary career before it was even over. The undefeated champion who couldn't defeat the cut. Khabib Nurmagomedov was a force of nature, an undefeated grappling machine who seemed invincible inside the octagon. But outside of it, he was fighting a different, more dangerous battle. Ahead of UFC 209, Khabib was scheduled to face Tony Ferguson for the interim lightweight title. It was one of the most anticipated fights in years, but the fight never happened. Khabib's weight cut went horribly wrong. The process of draining his body of water pushed him to the brink. He was hospitalized with severe complications from dehydration and kidney issues. Doctors pulled him from the fight. Imagine that. One of the toughest men in the world brought to his knees not by an opponent's punch, but by the process of making weight. This wasn't a minor setback, it was a medical emergency that stole a fight from the fans and put the health of a global superstar in serious jeopardy. It showed everyone that even the eagle could be grounded by this sport's most dangerous ritual. The towel and the tragedy. Daniel Cormier is a legend, an Olympic wrestler, a UFC champion in 2 weight classes, one of the greatest to ever do it. But his time at light heavyweight was haunted by the scale. At UFC 210, DC was set to defend his 205-pound title against Anthony Johnson. At the weigh-ins, he stepped on the scale. It read 206.2 pounds. He was over the limit. He had 1 hour to lose 1.2 pounds. What followed was one of the most bizarre and disturbing scenes in UFC history. Cormier returned to the stage, clutching a small towel in front of him. He placed his hands on the towel, leaning his weight onto it while standing on the scale. Miraculously, the scale now read 205 pounds.
Now Daniel Cormier is back and made weight. How did that happen? Unbelievable.
The Towelgate incident was controversial, but it overshadowed the real story. Daniel Cormier, a man who walked around at nearly 240 pounds, was pushing his body to a dangerous extreme to squeeze down to 205. He looked drained, exhausted, a husk of his powerful self. He was risking his health to make a number on the scale, using a trick that everyone could see was a desperate move from a man in distress. Uriah Hall, the last-minute collapse. Sometimes the danger strikes just hours before the fight. In 2018, just a day before his main event fight in St. Louis, Uriah Hall was forced to withdraw. He was hospitalized due to complications from his weight cut. His kidneys were failing. His body couldn't handle the stress. Fans were disappointed, but Hall was fighting for his health. He wasn't a fighter missing weight because he was unprofessional. He was a professional athlete whose body was pushed to the absolute brink. His hospitalization was another red flag, another warning siren that the sport was playing with fire. A visual nightmare. Some dangers are hidden in hotel rooms, others are broadcast live for the world to see. At a UFC weigh-in in 2019, bantamweight fighter Aspen Ladd stepped on the scale. She made the 135-pound limit, but that's not what anyone remembered. Her body was shaking uncontrollably. She shivered and trembled, her muscles twitching from severe dehydration and caloric depletion. She looked fragile, weak, a million miles from the elite athlete she is. The images were shocking. They were a visual representation of what extreme weight cutting does to the human body. It was a public display of suffering. It made the abstract danger terrifyingly real. You didn't need to understand the science of dehydration to look at Aspen Ladd and know that something was very, very wrong. The ultimate price. The stories of Barao, Khabib, and Ladd are frightening, but the ultimate warning comes from a promotion outside the UFC, a tragedy that forced the entire sport to look in the mirror. In 2015, 21-year-old flyweight young Jian was scheduled to fight at ONE Championship 35. During his weight cut, his body gave out. He was rushed to the hospital where he suffered a cardiopulmonary failure. He died. He was only 21 years old. Young Jian did not die in a fight. He died trying to make weight. His death was a wake-up call. It proved that the worst-case scenario was not a hypothetical. It was real. ONE Championship responded by instituting sweeping reforms, banning weight cutting by dehydration, and implementing hydration tests to ensure fighters were healthy. This tragedy begs the question, why did it take a death for a major organization to make such a drastic change? The sanctioned problem. So why does this continue? If it's so dangerous, why do fighters still do it? The answer is simple. Size equals advantage. If you can drain yourself to hit a lower weight class, you can rehydrate and step into the cage bigger and stronger than your opponent. In a sport of tiny margins, that's a powerful incentive. When everyone is doing it, you have to do it just to keep up. It's an arms race with the human body. Commentator Joe Rogan has called it sanctioned cheating, and the cost is immense. Beyond the hospital visits and the cancelled fights, the long-term damage is even scarier. Severe dehydration reduces the fluid that cushions your brain. That means a fighter entering the cage after a brutal cut is more vulnerable to concussions and a traumatic brain injury. They're literally risking their long-term brain health for a temporary size advantage. The UFC has taken small steps with early weigh-ins and weight monitoring, but the core problem remains. The culture of extreme weight cutting is still woven into the fabric of the sport. These fighters push their bodies to the absolute limit for our entertainment. They endure pain we can barely imagine. The very least the sport can do is make sure that the scale isn't the most dangerous opponent they ever have to face. The fight for fighters' safety is far from over, and it's a fight that matters more than any championship belt.